Would like to call the Rutherford County Board of Education special called meeting to order, May 23rd, 2022. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Ms. Claire Maxwell. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. I'd like to invite everybody to join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Next item, Mr. Sproul.
All right, financial matters found on tab 1. We'll start with the general purpose school fund 141 for the 22-23 revised budget. This proposed expenditure budget provides a 5% pay increase for all Rutherford County certified and classified employees and 3% increase for the bus contractors. The budget includes the April BEP estimate as well as updated local revenue. As you can see there, Mr. Beaudry, is there anything you want to add to the numbers you have there?
Yes, sir. I'll walk
5% increase.
If you like, I'll walk them through real quick
Yes,
of the updated
absolutely.
on the revenue. As when we last left off in April, when the board approved the preliminary budget, just as we discussed, the state was they were about a month behind on getting the April BEP estimates, which has been the case for the last few years now. Since then, we've gotten in not only our BEP revenue estimates for April, we also received in the new certified tax rate, after reappraisal. Touching on that, we received our BEP revenue estimates for April. I went ahead and looked at all 95 county school systems. I like looking at that every year to see what people are doing as far as growth. When we're here in Rutherford County, we have such massive growth that, it's hard to imagine that once you get outside of about 16 counties across the state of Tennessee, there's really no student growth at the county level in the school systems. We had, we had 34 counties, according to the April BEP estimate sent out to all the different county school systems. We had 34 counties that actually lost ADM this current fiscal year. Those 34 total had a loss of 6,295 ADM, and that includes losses in Davidson and Shelby County losing students. Now, in Rutherford County, we had a gain this fiscal year on our April estimate, and I suspect it'll probably go up a little bit when we get the May or June estimate. We had a gain of 2,097 students. So that means across the state of Tennessee, for Tennessee county school systems, we had 15% of the total growth in the state of Tennessee at the county school system level.
I would like to add also that the ADM that is calculated is, I give a shout out to our attendance department, which, by the way, as I was looking at some data that was released by the State Department of Ed throughout the state of Tennessee, we have some of the lowest numbers of people working in our attendance department. We're one of the lowest in the state. They go through and make sure that we're getting the appropriate information to EIS, and that's how we get funded. So a shout out to them and also to our special ed department.
Yes, special ed and CT has done a tremendous job with, especially this last year and the year before, going back through the numbers, because Mr. Spurlock said, when you're counting not just the student itself, but also getting additional because it costs more, for CT programs and special education students to care of, it's very important that those attendance numbers are reported to the state that we serve those students. So all those departments be commended for their hard work to make sure what you see in front of you, the revenue, is the fruits of the labor of those departments. Okay. Besides the BEP estimates increasing, we also have in front of you this one page. This is the preliminary property tax levy of the certified rate that the state just brought in just recently to the county. In that first column, you can see it's 2020 current tax rate. We have a current tax levy, property tax levy for the county of $2.2194. After the reappraisal was done, that certified tax rate had to be dropped because the appraisals went up, just like it talked about in the newspaper. The appraisals went up, therefore the levy had to go down to as much as possible create a revenue neutral reappraisal. On that second column, you can see the 2022 certified tax rate. It went from the 2.2194 down to a 1.6158. And Mr. Spurlock and I, we were looking at this, and Ms. Nolan had traced back all the way to 1994 on the certified rates during the reappraisal. And this is the lowest rate not only to 1994, but we found in my office a budget from 1977. Shout out to Jeff Sandby for keeping everything. And he had the certified rate in 1977 was higher than it is now, even as small as the county was. So that shows, what that shows is the tremendous growth of Rutherford County. On down at the very bottom, and this is where, you know, the main thing with the revenue for the current property tax, as you can see now, the revenue per added penny, our preliminary penny in the unshared pennies, which is in the county general fund, the highway fund, educational capital projects funds for this board, is per penny, it generates $1,431,814 per unshared penny. Now, if you look, it says schools right below that. That's the general purpose school fund for the county. We have to share based on enrollment between the city schools and the county for that penny, so we don't get as much for that penny. As you can see for the schools, this is what's in our general purpose school fund. Each penny on the levy generates $1,220,621. As you can see right there, on to the left of where it says revenue per added penny, it's got the city and the county. The percentage, that's the weighted average of enrollment. You can see the city schools has 14.75% of all the school children in public schools in Rutherford County enrolled in their school this year. So they receive, in that next column, they receive of the county property tax, they receive $16,103,433. That's what we share with them with property tax because of their city school system. Okay? Does anybody have any question on that before I go to the summary of the GPS? Okay. If you turn the page, this is the stack, the stapled stack. This is your general purpose school fund. This is what we went through already. There has been no changes in positions. We still have the 182 additional positions that this board reviewed in detail and approved. That has not changed. We have updated the revenues to reflect what I just discussed on the BEP, the property tax, and some other smaller amendment or adjustments for like increase in mixed drink tax, for example. We've adjusted some expenditures for bids that have come in, and we arrive at this front cover page of this stack. I put a summary page for all of you. I have an estimated July 1, 2022 assigned, unassigned beginning fund balance. And what that means is unassigned and assigned is accounting talk for that money could be used. It's not restricted money. It can be used to balance your budget. We're on target to end this fiscal year with a fund balance of $65,282,800. And that comes up to about 14% of our expenditures. At the end of 2019, we were around 4%. We're at, like I said, about 14% now. The good news, that sounds like a lot of money until you look at the budget expenditures. This gives us a cushion of about just under 2 months of operating expenses. So we have a good fund balance that if we had an economic downturn, we wouldn't be scrambling. We would actually have funds available to hopefully weather through some of that so we wouldn't put our employees in danger. of layoffs. You know, we saw that several years back. This is going to give us a pad to be able to take care of cash flow needs, okay? You drop down to the next, you have your estimated revenues with our updated BEP and county property tax of $471,215,162. That's where it stands right now for the revenue estimate. That will change in the next few weeks as, once again, the county trustee is looking at property tax appeals right now and some other items like that. So that might adjust one way or the other, but I don't believe by much. We see that every year. Estimated expenditures, bottom line, $491,473,674, leaving us with an estimated June 30th, 2023 assigned, unassigned ending fund balance of $45,024,288. And the percentage of that assigned, unassigned ending fund balance, if we brought in every dollar of that budget revenue and we spent every dollar of those budgeted expenditures, we would arrive at that ending fund balance with 9.16% of those budget expenditures in the fund balance. And remember, the state requires 3%. So we meet our maintenance of effort test with this budget. We far exceed our fund balance test. And you have a budgeted deficit of $20,258,512, which equates to equals about 4% of your expenditures in a budgeted fund balance deficit. Right now, we've got, as you can see on that bottom line, I put a note. Currently, right now, with our amended budget, we have a budgeted fund deficit, and once again, that's a budgeted. If we spend everything, which we won't, $14,679,416. That right there in a nutshell is the budget that you folks have already gone through on the expenditure side, and it's ready for you to vote on if you wanted to. Now, I've got an alternative that I want y'all to look at and consider. If you go to the next page, it's a one-pager. It's another summary. I was listening to you folks, and we've been talking about what are we going to do with this backlog of capital projects that we have about $200 million that's backlogged, and there's, as Mr. Lee's going to talk to you a little about. I know we're not talking about the capital project fund tonight, but this is dealing with the general purpose school because that's where the money's going to come from. Okay. We have a plan that could address, if this board and the commission agree, we have a plan that we can address a good amount of those backlog projects this next year and each year going forward. On this right here, this second scenario for your general purpose school fund, if you notice, the expenditures and the fund balance projections, they're all the same. The only thing that changes is your estimated revenue. That is with 7 cents on the tax levy removed from the general purpose school fund, and we request the county commission to place those 7 cents from our GPS fund over to our education capital project fund. With the revenue that's already in the capital project fund, it's now 4 cents after the reappraisal, it's 4 cents instead of 5.5. We can move those 7 extra cents over. We'll have 11 cents total. That combined with about $2,450,000 of budgeted development tax with the carryover projects, we're looking at Mr. Lee having around $20 million this next year to attack some of the critical needs of some of the back.
Good thing is this 7 cents has already been shared, right?
That's the other point is, yes, sir. That's why I wanted you folks to look on that shared penny versus the unshared penny. If we move the property tax over to the education capital projects, we do not share it. You have a couple $100,000 more that you would have sent to the city of Murfreesboro of county property tax. You have that much more purchasing power for these backlog projects. If, let's say we don't do this and it sits in the GPS fund, instead we leave the levy there. Something happens like what Mr. Lee dealt with a few years back, or a couple years back with Blackman High, and we have a large HVAC failure. we're then using a shared penny instead of the additional money on the unshared penny if we put it in the capital project fund on front end.
Did we
Mr.
use
Bo-
a shared
I'm sorry.
penny, excuse me, did we use a shared penny on the Blackman High project?
I believe we did. We utilized GPS fund because we didn't have the money available.
Okay, Mr. Bodie, I'm sorry, I want you to go through that one more time. I'm writing it down so I can look at it. I mean, it sounds wonderful. I just want to hear it one more time. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
7 cents removed from the,
Yes, ma'am. Currently, right now, we're looking at a property tax levy in the general purpose school fund of 76.25 cents.
okay,
We would move that down
okay,
to 69.25. We would move that 7 cents over to education capital projects funds with, after reappraisal has a 4 cent, we would move that up to 11 cents. And that's the only thing we would change from the budget and the GPS fund that you're voting on tonight.
okay. So this is the one on proposed budget, alternative number 1. That's what I'm looking at, right? Okay,
That's your two choices. You can.
Okay.
Now, once again, if we do that, if you look at the budgeted deficit, it goes from, with keeping all 7 cents in, it stays at a budget deficit of $20,258,512. It grows to $28,802,859.
okay,
If we're expecting TISA to
Yeah.
come in the next fiscal, you want to talk
Let me
about
jump in
it?
there.
Okay.
With the TISA, not TISA, TISA, or TISA, with that, you get your money up front. So what growth typically now, 4 or 5 months later, we get portion of it, and at the end, sometime in 1st of June, something like that, we get the last part of it.
Beginning of July, sometimes.
So we'll get that up front
Right.
as the kids, come in. We'll get that up front. So that's a little different, and we're going to show that. I'm going to show that tomorrow during our presentation on what that looks like. Typically, when you look at what we do, and what we've done is I've taken the calculator, put in each one of those specific areas in the base in terms of enrollment, projected enrollment, and we get real conservative with it. Then we go into the weights of all of our at-risk kids in different areas. We're looking somewhere with the local and state and federal, somewhere an increase of about $50 million from this year's budget, proposed budget.
Presents an excellent opportunity right here to.
So the funding will no longer be in arrears?
Right. Well, it could be, depending on how well we manage it. One of our biggest challenges is going to be getting teachers in classrooms. There may be a situation, I know we met, Dr. Anthony and Dr. Sullivan and I met about a month or so ago, and one of the things we cannot do is we cannot allow any classrooms to go unfilled with an educator. That may include contracting out for a synchronous virtual teacher with someone in the classroom. There's where it would eat some cost.
okay.
You'd have to have someone in that classroom to assist and also make sure that everything's going well. But we can't avoid that. And we've been doing a lot of things to recruit, but we're still going to have some challenges. And that's something we're going to have to look forward, make a safety net, if you will.
Thank you. And Mr. Boder, you said instead of the 8 million, it's going to be 20 million with
It'll be
this?
10 million for additional projects because we pick up that a little over 200,000 for each unshared penny when we move it, instead of leaving it in GP.
Okay,
So we're looking at 10 more million in additional backlogged capital projects. Mr. Lee's, he already had it
All
on the
right, so-
approved. So
In anticipation of having this conversation, you got handed out, it's basically the 177 fund that we've been looking at for a while. What's in green is what you've already approved, okay? So that's what we've approved. It's already gone to the county. It's our money for this upcoming year. What's in yellow is in anticipation of this 7 cents coming over, is the $10 million. These are the projects, based on receiving this money, that we would recommend that we would take care of. These are all imminent need projects. Now, I'm going to give you a caveat. Doug's good at giving you an option. I'm going to give you an option. One thing that we can look at, if we can continue this going forward, and this we can, Doug thinks that going forward next year, we could continue this to where we move money over from the general purpose to the 177. If we can do this, I would propose that we begin to look at the LED lighting program so that we can get the lights replaced, and in 3 years' time, we begin to see a savings back to us that we can then in turn take those savings and move them forward as well. Are you kind of with me?
Like a stacking, yeah.
But I think for this year, we have an option. What we would do is we either take Stewartsboro off and we go ahead and start the lighting this year, or we leave Stewartsboro on and we look at doing the lighting starting next year.
Mr. Lee, would you agree that HVAC and roofing would be our #1 priority?
Yes, sir. And that's where
what
the
would
bulk of
concern-
this money, I got $8.5 million in 2 projects in
That
HVAC.
would be what would concern me with going with the LED now, expending your revenue and waiting for it to recoup, and we could find ourselves back in another hole again. I mean, of course, that's the board's decision, but that's just my 2 cents.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, I would take care of our major maintenance, our HVAC and our roofs. I mean, I get it, but you can't have a classroom, or you can't have kids in a building that's not properly heated and cooled, and there's no leaking roofs. So that's my concern.
So in advance of allocating that money to LED, take
I would
care of
get
these?
those major things taken care of first. I mean, that's just me.
I see that argument. I mean, I think it's,
That's what I'm saying. It's a choice. That's why this year I said no. If I'm going to get this gift, I'm going to hit 2 heavy hitters. I'm going to eat up $8.5 million of this $10 million in 2 places. That's Rockville Elementary and Stewartsboro. They're my 2 that I wake up at night going, I hope they're running tomorrow.
wow. Mr. Bodery, I do have a question, and I like the optimism of this, but with what is the likelihood that the commission would support this? Will they look at this, or is there a possibility they could look at this and say, oh, well, you have some wiggle room, let's give this to, say, the sheriff's department instead? Could this affect our budget process with the commission?
The commission, being the funding body, they could do that. Of course, I've done this and worked with a lot of counties in the last job, putting together budgets. I have never seen in 20 years a growing school system where the county commission removes property tax levy and swaps out for sales tax. I've never seen that before. I've seen that in rural counties that are losing large ADM, like we discussed at the beginning. Never seen a commission do that before in a growing county. That said, they can do what they want with their tax levy, but I believe from discussions that our commissioners have had with me and Ms. Spurlock and this board, I believe a lot of our commissioners want to see these critical capital projects addressed, since, once again, they're going to break anyway. They're on their last leg. We've talked about that. Mr. Lee's gone through that in detail, and this is an opportunity that we could address those things with an unshared penny instead of shared. And it's like we had this discussion, that when you walk in from work and the air in your house is warm in June, because obviously you have a compressor going out in your AC, you can ignore it, and you can wait till July when it gets really hot, or August, and then when you realize it's broken, and now you're going to pay for it anyway. This gives us the opportunity to get these 2 critical ones address.
Sounds like a dreadful scenario, first of all, for me, 'cause
Yeah.
I appreciate the air conditioning. Okay, so it's likely, I mean, they could, but it's unlikely that the commission would
I
pull back
cannot-
from us or
from what
withhold
they
any
have
kind of
said-
funding.
From what they've
Okay.
said, you know, communicating with their desire to have this funded. But I cannot speak for
Right.
county commission, but I can only speak to what they've communicated to me, Mr. Spurlock, and his board.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Lee, what's our total backlog on capital maintenance? That's pretty impressive, or,
$199,341.
oh, you know, that's a lot. And if we don't start taking bigger bites out of that,
Right.
I don't know when.
I think this is a great plan. I think, and I appreciate you bringing this to us. I just want to look at both sides of that coin.
I think I
Sure.
agree with you,
Yes.
pushing the LED lights off another year or so, just because you got to keep the building open. And like Mr. Spurlock said, roofs and AC units, that doesn't keep the building open. So I think we got to look at that a little bit, so.
Okay, thank you.
I too appreciate y'all looking out at all the things that we could possibly do. As I've mentioned before, I'm a little afraid of this TISA funding. We've all spoken about it. I'm afraid they're giving us a little sugar up front to go with the pain that's going to come in 5 years. Because everybody in the legislature that I've talked to are saying the county's going to absorb more of the cost for the schools after the TISA funding is fully implemented. And we really need to be looking at that too. We need to be put money back, or rainy day fund, or what. I know we don't really have any to put back. I'm a single mother, I get that. But we can't be short-sighted because we think that they're gonna give us 50 million or 57 million. Because after those 5 years, they're not gonna give us anything, and we're gonna be more responsible for the cost of our school system. And if we stay on the trajectory we are with people moving here 20 a day, we're going to be, we're going to be in trouble.
One of the good, and I agree with you, Ms. Sharp, is, you know, I love being conservative with this because, you know, it's
And
easier to-
you're fabulous.
One of the good things with this is you're paying cash. We're not talking about issuing debt. So let's say that happens and we have to find some additional revenue in a few years down the road. By paying cash, by moving this to the capital project fund, and if it turns out to be very scary times a few years down the road for whoever's on this school board and that commission, they can always move that levy back to the GP fund operating. Now, they'll still have backlog, but the thing is, I see your point. That way, we're not tying our hands by requesting the commission to do a shift.
And I do think there is some point you're making in terms of the local, but quite frankly, Mr. Boder and I have talked about it. I don't know how these rural counties are going to do it, to be honest with you. I don't know that's going to improve. Now, with the suburban counties like Sumner, Montgomery, Rutherford, they're going to be able to do it because kids are still coming in. I don't think we're going to drop over 2,000. I hope you don't next year, but I would say between 800 and 1,000 that you will come back with additional ADM another year. And quite frankly, it's still based on ability to pay. You're talking about the state is about 59% of what goes into the base, and then the locals 43%. We're already paying 642 positions outside of BEP because of how we're made up and the growth that we're experiencing.
That and just the way the BEP funding.
Yeah, it's
I mean, it's
different.
it's inadequate for a lot of things. We discussed that in other meetings. But unless anyone has a question, that in a nutshell, you have what you already had, you know, which is that first summary page with the actual detailed budget that you can choose. Or you can have what I put as alternative one with the 7-cent shift request to the county commission from the GP to the education capital projects to tackle those projects Mr. Lee described. So there is 2 choices for you tonight.
Okay. So, board, we need to decide which one we want to support and move forward. You'll need a vote on this. So, Mr. Spurlock, will you read the motion for us?
Yeah, proposed expenditure budget provides funding for 5% increase for all RCS certified classified employees and 3% increase for both county bus contractors. This budget includes April BEP estimate as well as updated local revenue and the movement of 7 cents on the property levy over to 177.
Correct, from 141 to 177.
Yep.
Alternative one, right?
What's that, sir?
We're looking at one, right? Option one?
Yes, sir. Option one.
Option one.
Alternative number one would be the 7-cent move to capital
And this
project.
is a no-brainer. We've got to make these big chunks up. We're not going to get anywhere. I mean, even if we didn't add another dime to deferred maintenance, it'd still take us 10 years to catch up, even with $20 million a year. This is the only way we're going to make any ground here. So this is a no-brainer, and I'd be glad to make the motion.
Okay. Mr. Young has made a motion. Thank you, Ms. Bratton. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Any member wish to abstain? Next item, Mr. Spurlock.
All right, number 2 is the budget amendment fiscal year 21-22, the general purpose school fund. The budget amendment cleans up both revenue and expenditure line items as the end of the fiscal year approaches. On the revenue side, the budget is amended to reflect the year-to-date collections of state BEP, IDEA, high cost, and mixed drink tax. The E-rate revenue is decreased to reflect the successful current year conversion of Rutherford County Schools from the E-rate BEAR application process to the service provider invoicing, SPI application process that the vast majority of Tennessee County school districts have already transitioned to years ago. This newer type of E-rate application process will no longer require Rutherford County taxpayers to pay 100% upfront costs for the E-rate program and seek reimbursement of 60%, thus saving the county in administrative work and money. On the expenditure side, the larger items of this cleanup amendment reflect higher cost and demand school maintenance supplies and parts and contracted summer floor stripping and waxing due to the school custodian staffing shortage. Quite frankly, what that was is our summer camps run through the month of June. Last year, we were able to use some of our money from our learning programs. This year, the state said we couldn't. I think it's a little tune of $200,000 that we're going to have to pick up. Is that still that?
For the summer campsites alone, it's just under $300,000 that was
Okay.
denied by the state.
A little bit more than what I thought. All right, so this amendment has a net increase of both current year revenue expenditures of $3,027,341, which is less than 1% of the original expenditure budget for the fund with no use of the fund balance. Tell us a little bit about the E-rate again. How many years have we failed to do this?
This is, if you remember back at the beginning of the year, we brought in an E-rate consultant. Several other counties utilized those because, once again, E-rate is with technology purchases and internet connectivity, that's some pretty intensive, application process and paperwork. Back when E-rate first started back in the 90s, the only way that you could to apply for this funds was called a BEAR application. And what that meant was you would go and you would buy and pay 100% for the service or the equipment, and then you could request reimbursement of 60%. Of course, sometimes you could wind up with an unallowable cost or paperwork, something would fall through the cracks and you wouldn't get all your reimbursement. About 10 years ago, the program created what was called that Service Provider Invoicing, SPI application. And basically all the counties in Middle Tennessee, the school systems went to that because what you do is you then submit in and say, this is what I want to purchase, and then the county would pay just their 40%. And then the vendors, thus the name of the program, Service Provider Invoicing, the vendors that you use for the services would have to invoice directly to to get their reimbursement from the E-rate program. So basically, we are no longer the middleman for the companies to get their money. That and all the administrative costs that was falling on this system, it's gone now. So you see a decrease of over $1 million in E-rate. It's because we're not spending that on the other side, the 60% anymore. So we're no longer fronting money for that.
Okay, motion to amend the 141 to clean up revenue and expenditure line items for a net increase of $3,027,341 for both revenue and expenditure budget line items as presented.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns, members of the board? Any clarification needed? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Any member wish to abstain? Next item.
All right, number 3 is the budget for the fiscal year 21-22 centralized cafeteria fund. The centralized cafeteria fund fiscal year 21-22 amendment budgets for additional cafeteria salary expenses and food costs to support the Rutherford County Schools summer learning camps, as well as to provide temporary $3 per hour increase for hourly school nutrition department employees that work during the month of June 2022 in order to cover the food service staffing needs for Rutherford County summer learning camps. This pay incentive recognizes the great need for adequate staffing for school nutrition operations during the month of June of 2022 and the fact that our 10-month hourly cafeteria employees do not normally report to work to serve meals in the month of June. The funding for this one-time hourly increase will be provided by additional federal USDA seamless summer funding. The note is, while not included in the current year budget amendment, it is requested that the board authorize this temporary $3 per hour increase for school nutrition staff working during the month of July of 2022 for the school summer feeding programs, and this budgeted expense will be included in the proposed 2022-2023 school nutrition fund budget. Motion to approve the fiscal year 21-22 Fund 143 budget amendment of $923,528 to increase in both current year revenues and expenditures for additional costs for food service for the Rutherford County Schools learning camps, and to authorize a temporary $3 per hour increase for the month of June of 2022 and July of 2022 to the Rutherford County Schools Nutrition Department hourly employees to support the food service staffing needs of the Rutherford County Schools summer learning camps. Costs for the July 2022 temporary pay increase will be included in the proposed 2022-2023 school nutrition fund budget as presented.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Mr. Bodery, the 923,000 number, that is for the cost of the summer camp program, the food nutrition program, as well as the additional $3.
That's correct. That $923,528, that includes the $3 temporary pay increase for the month of June, and also for the food and non-food items and supplies that the camps will do in the month of June. Then, of course, once we hit July in the next fiscal year, like I said, I'll have that in next fiscal year's budget for summer school in July.
Do you have the total for just the $3 increase for staff? So we know what that number is?
I do. It's on the detail. The detailed budget amendment, at the very back of your, it's a $250,000 increase in 73,165 for cafeterias. And then, of course, there's some that are the field supervisors, 189, 25,000. And that also reflects, as below, it's itemized for the Social Security, state retirement, 10.16% match, employee Medicare, and there's your salary-related line items right there, the increases. And below that's the food prep, food supplies, and other supplies and materials.
We're looking at this.
Right there. It says Rutherford County Schools, School Nutrition Fund 143, Budget Amendment number 3 on the
Okay.
top. for summer camp pay increase and other camp costs.
This is paid out of USDA.
That is correct. The Seamless Summer program is still going on through the summer. So that's on the revenue side of that at the very top. Revenue code 47114, that's the USDA reimbursement. Other, that's where the state has instructed me to put the Seamless Summer funding in. So as you can see, that 923,528 is reflected in revenue coming in to match the expenditure.
Okay. I absolutely appreciate all the employees who are going to work for summer, but I always have a concern when we see an additional being applied to one exclusively. And so that's why my question, because arguably our janitorial staff and our custodians will have additional work because they normally don't have students in the building. And I know that we're taking care of our teachers and EAs, or at least I hope we are appropriately. So that's that clarification for me.
I agree with you. That's why, because they're short-staffed. That's why we have over $500,000 that was in that GP amendment that was just approved for that, as detailed, that summer third-party contract waxing and stripping so our custodians are not burdened with that extra work that's happening because of the summer schools. Not only the summer camps, we also we have that contracted for a couple other school buildings outside of the summer camp location, simply because to take that off the custodians.
Okay, so we will give them some reprieve in this process. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So if the USDA stops funding that will be something we will have to consider, correct?
You'll get to vote on that on Thursday on meal price increase. So,
I see.
yes, sir.
That ends after this summer, the next fall, right?
Right now, USDA has no plans to continue the Seamless Summer option into next year, and we've been preparing for that. So, our cafeteria fund, if you recall, this board allowed us to centralize staffing, like all the other schools in Middle Tennessee, the systems do. That's proved to be very beneficial with controlling labor costs, and by doing that, that allowed us to increase pay. It also allowed us, like the board voted recently, for over $600,000 of new equipment for our kitchens, for some of the aged equipment, and we have a decent fund balance, so we can actually go into next fiscal year. You're sneaking Thursday's information. We can go into next fiscal year without having to do a dramatic meal price increase, because we have the fund balance, so we want to maximize participation from our students. And you don't maximize it like some districts are going to be raising it pretty high. We're going to kind of hold down to see what kind of participation we've got before we adjust anymore.
So this encompasses two different groups, the learning camps that we're talking about and the summer feeding program, correct?
That's right. That's right, sir.
Okay. Now, what part of that is the summer feeding versus feeding the camp participants?
The majority of that is for the summer camps. And then, of course, we have feeding sites. They're not as much, but that's the one that's open to everyone, that a child could come in and get a meal.
Now, one of the things that we need to be cognizant of is making sure next year, start telling these parents they need to feel that are eligible for free and reduced lunch. They need to fill it out. Now, that won't impact, as we go into TISA, that won't impact the title schools, because those will be considered concentrated poverty. When a school is identified as a title school under TISA, everyone in that school eats free.
Correct. And food service has a good plan for rollout to capture as many as possible for free and reduced that qualify. They've just ordered a substantial additional amount of applications, and they're going to have a robust rollout to get as many people that qualify on free and reduced coming in next year when this Seamless Summer program lifts.
You might want to remind the board what our deficit was on bad debt prior to the COVID coming.
We were right at 300,000 when COVID shut us down in 19 or 20. And I have budgeted in this budget that you just approved for general purpose school fund just at $500,000 for bad debt. So I hope that does not happen. And so we will do our best going forward to work with this board. We have a plan. Imagine that.
Appreciate you. Any other questions, comments, concerns, members of the board? If not, We have a motion. Did you read this motion to us already? Would you read it again?
Do it again. Recommend a motion to approve the fiscal year 21-22 Fund Budget 143 budget amendment of $923,528, increase in both current year revenues and expenditures for additional costs for food service for Rutherford County Schools learning camps, and to authorize temporary $3 per hour pay increase for the month of June of 2022 and July of 2022 to Rutherford County's Nutrition Department hourly employees to support the food service staffing needs for Rutherford County Schools summer learning camps. The cost for the July of 2022 temporary pay increase will be included in the proposed 2022-2023 School Nutrition Fund budget as presented.
Thank you. We've heard the motion. If there are no questions, we'll entertain a motion.
I move.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell.
A second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Any member wish to abstain?
I wish to abstain.
Okay. Ms. Sharp will abstain. Thank you. All right, if there is no other business, thank you, Mr. Bodary and staff. We appreciate you. Thank you, Mr. Lee. We are adjourned.